You're listening to Infosec Sidekick, a cybersecurity podcast focused on building connections and elevating voices within the cybersecurity community. On this episode of Infosec Sidekick, we'll discuss the aftermath of the RSA conference. Together with my guest, Tom Alcock, co-owner of CodeRed, a recruiting firm in the cybersecurity industry, we'll discuss the current climate of the job market and some tips and tricks for those who might be looking. Let's get started. Welcome, and thank you so much for tuning in to this first episode of 2023 of the Infosec Sidekick Podcast. I'm your host, Travis Romero. I've got over 10 years of security operations experience working in multiple different verticals within cybersecurity, but by far my favorite thing to do is talk to other cybersecurity professionals and get their take on kind of the current news, what's happening, their careers. So that's largely why I started this podcast in the first place, and that's why I'm excited to really bring it back and have a variety of people on the show. So with that being said, I just wanted to again thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit infosecsidekick.com, and we have a free subscription available. This would basically just kind of subscribe you to receive emails whenever new content comes out. I'm aiming for weekly. I still have a very busy day job, so no guarantees there, but it is something that I'd like to do a little bit more of. Personal goal of mine, I suppose, do more writing, connect with more people. So this is all part of that journey, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. If you do want to help the podcast in a more concrete way, you can leave a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. That goes a long way and helps other people find the podcast. So I wanted to make my first episode of the podcast about, the aftermath of RSA. I had been seeing some interesting posts on LinkedIn from some of my connections, and they all had kind of the same theme, which I thought was kind of interesting. And it had to do with post-conference depression and grief. Now, I'm not a huge conference goer, and, this kind of struck me initially as a surprise, but ultimately it made a ton of sense to me. And I thought it would be important to talk about today because, especially in the, post-COVID world, whatever that is, this could be a little bit more impactful to people's everyday lives. I myself work remote full time. I'm lucky enough to have, a family and people that live in the same house as me, so it doesn't feel very isolating. But for many, or even if you do have that situation, the work camaraderie and, the friendships and stuff kind of took a back seat. So as people came together, I think for this RSA conference, it was kind of the highlight, right, of getting back into the conference world. Now, I just say that because it's likely one of the biggest conferences. I know there's plenty of people who have been going to smaller local community gatherings and other conferences that have been held now for, about a year. But it just felt like, if you've been online or have been hearing about RSA, it just kind of felt like everyone is expecting this to be the big one, right? So, to see this post-conference depression and grief kind of chatter felt important to me. And I don't know if this has always been something. Maybe I'm just now tuning into it. And I'm sure that's probably the case. But I figured, hey, what the heck? Let's talk about it now. So one of the posts that I saw that really kind of kicked off this thought process in my head was from Jason Blanchard at Black Hills Infosec. And he wrote, post-conference depression and grief is a real thing. Give yourself time to work through it. The big event is over and gone, and you missed the excitement of preparation and execution, and now it's quiet. It will take some time to be okay with that. Now, I think that's super true. Any events that we have in our lives, there's a high, and then there could be kind of a little bit of a low after that, because you've spiked. I'm not going to pretend to be a brain person, but you spike some kind of chemicals in your brain, and now you're winding down, and you have to readjust to normal life. You go from parties, drinks with vendors and friends, and just being around 1,000 people constantly, to sitting back in your room. My wall over here is pretty plain. It's tan, which is a horrible color for a room. I should probably paint that. But you go back to this kind of mundane environment, and I think it's very easy to fall back into that, back into a lower state than what you were before. So I think him pointing out that it's okay, right? It's okay to have quiet after this event is important. Quiet is definitely good, but I think another thing to keep in mind is that you can reach out to the same network that you met at RSA and have always had pre-RSA, right? Just because no one's hitting you up or whatever, they might be going through the same stuff. I think my day always gets brighter when someone, I haven't talked to in a while, reaches out and just asks how I'm doing. I promise you it'll be the same the other way. So I would definitely encourage, especially if you're feeling down post-event, but even just in general, it's honestly good networking regardless. If you're listening to this now, find someone you haven't talked to in a while or someone you really enjoy chatting with, reach out and say hello. The last thing I'm going to say on the RSA kind of depression, grief scenario is that I have an interview coming up with Daniel Shore. He is a PhD in organizational psychology, and he works in the cybersecurity industry, basically researching and implementing tactics to make better teamwork and more efficient processes. So I'm really looking forward to that. If this topic is something you're interested in, I think, subscribing and, following and waiting for that interview, it's going to be a good one. So I'm very excited and looking forward to that. Okay, so moving on. I think where we're going to go next is basic insights from RSA, and we're going to be pivoting into a broader discussion around the hiring situation within cybersecurity. So my interview with Tom Alcock, owner of Code Red Partners, is coming up here very shortly. But before we jump into that, I was able to talk to two of my colleagues in the industry and kind of get their opinion on how RSA went for them. And they both work in product. And so, this wasn't necessarily a reflection on the talk tracks or anything like that. It was just kind of, I would say, more framed in the mind of the cybersecurity market and the folks that were there. The first person I talked to, his name is Caleb, and it was his first time at RSA, which I can imagine was pretty crazy. He definitely spent most of his time on the expo floor, and he felt that the event was just totally massive. And I think that that's probably a pretty accurate description compared to, a lot of the other events that go on throughout the year. I would imagine the only things that really rival RSA are things like Black Hat, right? Just, I don't even know if anything comes to mind that would be necessarily the scale and the participation level there. So he said it was massive. definitely saw that everyone was traveling again. Everyone was attending these in-person events. It was just kind of, this realization for him that, people are here. Like there was no holding back. Again, it might have something to do with people just being ready and kind of using this RSA conference as the launching point for getting back into the swing of things. The next person I talked to is the head of product at a company. His name is Ofer. And his experience at RSA, he traveled from Israel, I believe. And he had very similar observations about the attendance. He actually felt that this was kind of peak attendance for RSA, which is crazy. Things are continuing just to kind of grow and grow in this space. And I suspect, if, of course, this was a record-breaking year, next year and the following year, are, I would assume, looking to break that record even further. But he had some interesting kind of observations about decision makers and, the people who were attending that event. He had mentioned that organizations seemed to, in his opinion, be growing weary of the old school players and, having some frustrations with them being able to deliver what they're actually trying to do within their programs. But he also wanted to emphasize that there was definitely a budget tightening kind of mentality. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It probably resonates with a lot of people listening because if you're in the cybersecurity industry now, you might be lucky and, be at a company that's experiencing some pretty crazy growth. But I think a lot of people, as is evidenced by the rifts and, a lot of the challenging layoffs we're seeing, a lot of companies are really kind of crunching numbers and just trying to keep the ship afloat right now. So Ofer had mentioned this is definitely something that he's seeing, right? So that any penny that's spent is under much more increased scrutiny. And rather than adding cool things or toys to the toolbox, it was much more about improving efficiency, right? Getting something that works at a baseline level. And then after that, can you improve my, efficiency? AI is definitely a hot topic, he mentioned. However, it was still seemingly more of a promise. And I think anyone who's kind of honest with themselves, I know I've seen some memes out there, about everyone being an AI expert right now. And I think if a lot of the sales and, product people out in the world, took a step back and looked at themselves, they might feel that way, just based off of my inbox. I think others might be able to relate there as well. So, Ofer was specifically talking about how while AI was being talked about, there wasn't really much being delivered on that front, which isn't entirely surprising to me. And last but not least, the biggest by far kind of thing I've heard from people who attended the event was that Hallway Con was way better than anything else. And I think that's basically alluding to the fact that people just liked to see each other again. I know over the past 2-3 years, myself included, people have met people online, remotely, in remote office locations, on Twitter, Mastodon, wherever you're at. You've met these people, you've built connections, and RSA was a place for people to kind of rekindle friendships and put faces to names and handles, on the internet. And, it was just fun. I was watching a video that was produced by RSA itself, by the conference itself, kind of doing a recap. And I found it pretty funny that was also kind of the highlight of their video. So I think that says a lot, when even the conference itself is just kind of saying, hey, like one of the biggest things we provide value for is, Hallway Con, coming in and just hanging out with everyone. So, yeah, definitely jealous I couldn't go. It sounds like those were kind of the highlights that I've been hearing around my connections. If you have any experiences that you want to share, I'd love to hear that in the comments, or just, shoot me a message, however you want to get that. I think everyone had a really good time in general, but there was a lot of diverse experiences there. So one of the things that I immediately started to think about once I was planning for this episode and thinking to myself, okay, RSA is over. I've been hearing reference to like conference week being over just because of how impactful it is to the cybersecurity industry and how kind of like cornerstone it is. It's almost like the end of a quarter, or the year, really, right? Like the event's over, what now? And one of the things that I immediately thought of was the cybersecurity job market. I'm lucky enough to be friends with some great recruiters, and I had known some of them that went to RSA, and I thought to myself, there's got to be some insights that were pulled here, right? I mean, just me, I'm busy with work and doing what I'm doing, and I'm not really truly paying attention to the job market right now. But even I, am sitting here and seeing the layoffs impacting our industry, but I'm still seeing job postings. My intuition is telling me things are just more competitive. People are coming out of college with cybersecurity degrees and, Security Plus certifications kind of, in high school. It wasn't like that 10 years ago. And certainly the layoffs, COVID, all of this stuff just changed the landscape significantly. And I have to imagine that the conversations at RSA and just the vibes and everything was going to give way to a new insight or just a perspective on the current state of the job market. Now, whether that ends up staying the way it is, the job market for the next 3 years, or if it changes tomorrow, I don't think it matters. I think it matters that we're kind of taking the opportunity to dissect that and understand it. So before I kind of just keep talking about it in my limited understanding and, just kind of pondering on it, I was able to get a hold of someone that I've known for a significant amount of time now. And we've both grown so much, and it was really great to catch up with him. Tom Alcock. Tom is a recruiter in the cybersecurity industry who actually started a recruiting firm from, I don't think it was his basement, but we'll call it a basement because that sounds pretty cool. He started his own company, doing cybersecurity recruiting called Code Red Partners, and you might have heard of them, but they're doing great work. They're growing tremendously, and he's really plugged into that space. So without further ado, let's hop right into my interview with Tom Alcock. All right, I'm joined here with Tom. Tom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. And thanks for having me on, Travis. I know we've known each other for a number of years now, and so really pleased to be on the Infosec Sidekick Podcast. I'm Tom Alcock. I'm one of the partners and co-founders of a business called Code Red. We specialize in cybersecurity staffing. We help large-scale companies post-IPO scale ICs right up to director, head of security, whilst also helping early-stage companies seed to Series D, make the first security hire, and then build out the security roadmap program. But yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Tom. Like you said, we've known each other for a while, so I appreciate you being kind of willing to hang out with me on one of the first episodes here in 2023. So we have quite a bit of topics I wanted to ask you about, but I wanted to start with just getting your kind of download on quote unquote conference week, as some might call it. I understand you've attended both BSides San Francisco and RSA. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your experiences at both of those events?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've just kind of caught up on my first couple of nights of like 8 hours sleep and been well hydrated and caffeinated. It was quite the week. So yeah, me actually I had a lot of my colleagues flying from different locations. We're a fully distributed workforce, so we're very fortunate to start our journey on the Friday before B-Sides. So we all flew in and did the booth setup. I was actually invited to a company called Resourcely, Travis McPeak and some of his folks. We filmed a podcast called the 404 Podcast. Literally off the plane, shower, straight into A16Z headquarters, filmed that, and then went to some happy hours, went to the Hacker Pizza group meetup, and then SemGrep had a happy hour. So that was really cool. The team, my team had set up the booth, and then we just kind of got together on Friday night and then jumped straight into B-Sides. And what a great event that is. Really, really enjoyed our time there. We were a leading sponsor, which is still a pinch me moment, I must say. I think we'd spoken kind of not that long ago about this, but I'd set this business up in my like lounge in the UK with my business partner. There was two of us. To now have this brand next to Google and Adobe will never get old. So that was pretty cool. So we full team that weekend. We brought the Careers Village on, which we can kind of talk about in a second, which was great. And then jumped straight into the RSA week, which was really full on. Yeah, so we were just a general sponsor. So we were a leading sponsor of the whole event, next to those companies I just mentioned. But this year, I've got a really good working relationship with Reed Loden, the president over there, and Crystal, they've got such a great team that give their time like weeks or months before the event, and then just work from like 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day to make it a success. And they are the real unsung heroes behind the scenes, and they do it because they love the community and they just do a fantastic job. But I got the opportunity this year to bring the Careers Village back, and it's only a deeper why for me. I think that last year we saw so many companies scaling and hiring off the charts. It was certainly what we call in staffing like a candidate-led market, whereas all the kind of staff level engineers could pick and choose from any company, and salaries went bonkers. Sign-ons, I saw 2 sign-ons of like $100,000 over 2 years to sign a job, and really, really quiet. And that isn't the case of the current market we find ourselves in over the last 6 or 9 months. So a lot of rifts. You'd be having to kind of be under a rock to not see the layoffs that have happened. And it doesn't get any easier because these are people that have given their best years professionally and their families and all this kind of stuff. So there's definitely a why there. A lot of people out of work, a lot of talented people out of work. And then there's people that are starting their careers journey as students that just graduate. They're trying to get their foot in the door. There's people from unconventional past trying to get in there. And I just wanted to put something together and build something that would give my community the opportunity to land a job. And that's why the Careers Village was just a bit of a brainchild. Unfortunately, I had the support from the BSidesSF group to put it together.
Very cool. Yeah, it's interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking about how a lot of the content I see mostly online is really focused around that second group you were mentioning, like the students and the up and coming and the people who want to break into cybersecurity. The situation now is actually very different, right? Because you have thousands of people who are very experienced, and the breaking into cybersecurity message doesn't resonate with those people, right? It's like, how do you, like, they've been there and now they're just saying, well, I need a job. What can I do to go above and beyond? I love the advice for the breaking into cybersecurity crowd, try hack me, kind of the classic stuff, right? Security plus, but you might be dealing with people who have 15 years of experience and, a CISSP and, all the different buzzwords, and they're still struggling in the climate today. So I think it's really cool that you were able to have like a careers village, and focus on, potentially both groups of people, by providing, I think I saw like resume services and kind of mock interviews.
I can actually tell you what we did, which was kind of cool. And BSides Seattle have tapped us up and said, hey, you did a great job. Was Code Red fancy coming out to Seattle? And so we're going there in 3 weeks now, Code Red team. So, and what we did was the main facets were resume advice. There's people, like you said, there's a variance of people that are looking right now. And the one track is the 15 years CISP individuals that have a lot of experience, but they've maybe been with Google for all that time, and they don't know what it's like to maybe start a job search, right? So we help with like resume building, career advice, interview advice, preparation, all that kind of stuff. We then brought some really cool companies together, and shout out to all these companies that came to support the village. Actual companies, tech companies that are hiring for security people. So we had Discord, Databricks, Truffle Security, kind of to name a few over there, which was really, really cool. And kind of they were conducting speed interviews, and kind of were present on the whole weekend. We had a couple of people, Karan and Raghav, who have written a book on breaking into security. They came and did some like book sign-ins and speaking to people there. We had lightning talks from very experienced security leaders on how they think about hiring to breaking into security. I had two of my team members do talks about like hacking your career. And then the one thing that was probably, even though that was the huge investment, the most popular thing by far, and the crown, the jewel of the crown, was the headshots, professional headshots to bolster people's LinkedIn profiles. And there was a line snaking around the whole kind of careers village the whole weekend. I may have partaken in a new headshot as well.
I noticed on your LinkedIn, it looks a little updated. That's crazy, man. It's so funny. Something as simple as that, like, provides so much value to people. Especially like the stereotypical tech geek sitting, working remote most of the time. To really like get up, and unless you're like an executive or a senior leader, to really get up and say, you know what, today I'm going to go pay someone to take my picture. My picture was on my LinkedIn was taken by my wife against, probably this wall. So I'm sure I could use your services. But so just to re-highlight that, I think it's pretty cool. You guys are going to be at BSides Seattle. So anyone who's listening who found that, this concept might be exciting, maybe they want to make their way over to BSides Seattle, and they might see you guys around at other conferences. I want to pivot quickly now, same topic, but what is your outlook on the job market? I know you kind of had some hints sprinkled in throughout, what we just talked about, but like the tone of this is things have changed clearly, like RIFs and the candidates market versus, the hiring market. I guess, what do you have for us in terms of, your kind of current assessment on what the job market's looking like?
Do you want my PC take, or do you want my like spicy take on this?
I'll leave it up to you. I think it's pretty open.
Yeah.
No, actually, you know what? Give it to us spicy, because you know what? No one's going to benefit from a half answer, right? So, no. And you're in the business, so let's hear it.
I am. Yeah. So like it is no surprise. Everything we just said, that the last 6-9 months has been really challenging. Q3, Q4, and Q1, a lot of post-IPO technology companies just aren't hiring. I think that or at least bolstering the teams of where they were. I think that because of the RIFs, there was a lot of, this is probably the one controversial bit, there was a lot of companies that had to let go of like sales, marketing, recruiting. Security in previous years, in previous rifts during COVID, was kind of not really touched, in my opinion. It was very rare that you were seeing security professionals on the market. That isn't true of the last 2 or 3 quarters. Now, there's a lot of people that were let go that maybe weren't performing, and it was a good way of getting rid of underperforming talent in kind of a mass exodus, and a good way to restart. And you've seen this from these companies now rehire. So that's definitely kind of one first point. We've worked with some huge companies at Code Red, and that job board is really, really slow. But what's been brilliant for us is like Series A to D, E, that maybe they're making their first security hire and then building out that kind of roadmap that they probably have raised, come from various VCs, quite a substantial amount of money, maybe 2021, 2022, and need to spend that and grow, or they won't be able to raise a future round. The spicy take, though, is that there's for great security talent, that like the market hasn't really changed. Like, it's so many companies struggle to identify top talent, and so there's been a few companies swallowing up really, really top tier security engineering talent in this kind of down market. And the best people that I know in my network that maybe have been with a company for 2 years, or things are slowing down, they're not holding back on their career. And genuinely, there is one school of thought of I'll stay with my company and kind of weather the storm. But that isn't true of a lot of experienced people in my network. They're not holding back on a career, and actually are seeing this time to really step it up. And kind of there's a lot of applications out there right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, I think just to kind of reflect on that, it sounds like, if you're kind of a very bright, experienced information security professional who has some demonstrated, achievements on your resume, nothing has changed. I mean, people are always going to be looking for that stuff. In fact, it might be a breath of fresh air when that resume comes across the desk, because there is so much talent out there looking now that, they may not really be, some people might be forced to kind of settle. I don't want to say that, but like,
no, that's exactly the trend that you're seeing. There are some people that kind of, it's a bit of a risk to take, and maybe they're on a skilled workers visa, or maybe they've got such kind of dependencies that they do really need to probably stay in a role or a company that is safe. And kind of the irony of that statement of a year ago is that we've seen these huge monolithic companies like Meta and Google lay off teams. So there's no such thing as safe. But yeah, there is one school of thought that just stay put, and there's one school of thought that let's see what else is out there. I must say as well, Travis, this is such an amazing period of innovation. There's so many great ICs and technical leaders that are using this kind of like down market to set up their own startups. They're either in the pipeline right now of about to put in their notice and create something in stealth, or they've already made the jump. And I know a handful of people that have come from really top tier engineering companies. We just mentioned a few, but kind of Netflix, Databricks, to name a few, that are now building really cool startups that they're building in this down market. So when the investment starts coming through, they're getting their seed rounds, maybe their Series A. And I think that this will be a really reflective time for a lot of people that made that jump, built in a down market, and really kind of build the future businesses that we now know are household names in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, great insights, Tom. Let's pivot quick again. Any quick hitter advice for people who are navigating the job market right now?
Yeah, so this was a pretty common conversation that I had at RSA, at BSides, and since. I think that a really important thing is networking for me. I think that if that's that you're starting your career, you're a graduate, and you turn up to an event like RSA or BSides, and you don't know anyone, you make the fact that you've made that first step is really important. So networking and building a brand in the current market is my tip number one. Be present, be engaging on LinkedIn. Try, like, if you're interested in AppSec, that you're following the hashtags on Twitter or LinkedIn, and just adding some level of kind of communication around it. Ask questions, and be part of the conversation. I think that networking is really important. If it's your local AppSec chapter or your BSides chapter or your OWASP chapter, there is always something locally kind of to you. And if that isn't possible, then there's like great online forums. I was very fortunate to go to a YSIS meetup in San Francisco. There was OWASP Connects, there's AppSec Village Connects that I'm talking to now. So there's always somewhere that you can kind of start. So networking. And then kind of, I think that in this market we find ourselves in, applying for jobs is the Wild West, if I'm honest. I think that building relationships with on-site recruiters is really important, and doing it in a polite and professional way, adding somebody on LinkedIn that you know is hiring for the roles, or even the hiring manager, but in a respectable, kind of empathetic way. If I'm a hiring manager and I'm having, hey, can you look at my resume? I'm interested. It's not going to go down too well, but just being proactive with the approach, I think, is there. I think sticking your resume onto a job board or a LinkedIn job application and thinking that's enough will not get you a job in this kind of current market. And so it's just being smart, and being kind of proactive there, asking for, being open on the likes of LinkedIn to say, hey, is anybody hiring, to people, and just being kind of looking out for other people as well in the same position. So that's kind of my two tips, like networking and just being proactive with kind of applications. I think they're probably the main two. And then I think mentorship is something that's, I think I will always advise, but also doing that in the right approach. If you're adding somebody on LinkedIn that you send them like a little blurb about why you're approaching them, and then say, hey, like, don't pitch for a meeting straight away. I'm really interested in CloudSec, container security, like application security, whatever you're interested in. Is there any kind of resources or advice you give to somebody like me? And then if there's somebody who's really involved and kind of communicative with that approach, I'm also looking for like a mentorship. Do you know anybody in your network that would do that type of thing? I think if you ask everybody, it comes across a bit kind of lazy, and people are busy. Like, this is a busy time for a lot of people, but there are, you know this better than most, Travis, there are so many people willing to kind of give back, pay forward, whatever the term is. And you don't know what you don't know. And so just putting yourself out there and being a bit vulnerable, I think you'll be surprised with the kind of the level of appreciation or kind of support that you get from individuals.
Great tips, Tom. As someone who's kind of like, I don't know, made some advances in my own career into like the management space. One thing I've noticed, even of my bosses and people who are in places that I want to get to one day, you start to realize as you're going up, like, everyone is still looking forward. No one has reached their destination per se, right? So you're absolutely right when you say, like, reach out, like asking someone to be their mentor or for you to be mentored by them is actually an opportunity for that person to also advance their own career, because mentoring is a skill and it's something that they might be looking for as well. So you never know like who's on the other side of that screen and what they might be looking for. And you will never know unless you try. So
I love that. I couldn't have said that better. And not enough people recognize that mentorship piece, that is actually, like, I always say that an interview is a two-way street, right? There's a client hiring and there's a candidate assessing, is this the not forever home? I'm based out of the Bay Area. 2 years is a forever. But that's kind of one thing. And the mentorship piece you just touched on is really, really nice. there is one person that gets to learn from somebody else, but there's also somebody that is able to share their experiences and their kind of wisdom and see that through somebody else. I think that's really rewarding for sure. So the other thing I'd say is doing talks. Like that's a really scary thing to do. And I recently did a talk, and I've been in this field for a while now, and I'm still kind of worried about, am I going to say the right thing or not? But there's always some level of wisdom, whatever the level. There's people, I think people get scared about doing talks because they're talking on a subject that really isn't that interesting to people that are maybe a senior or staff level engineer. But that's the wrong mindset. I think the important mindset is that there's always going to be somebody that is going to be interested in that. Maybe it's your first year in cybersecurity, and so penetration testing kind of is really exciting for somebody else there, whereas they're thinking, would anybody come to this talk? There's always going to be an audience for it.
Always. All right, Tom. Thanks, man. This has been a really good conversation. Just to wrap it up, where can people find you? Is there anything you wanted to shout out kind of at the end here?
Yeah, my team, I'm pretty proactive in the cybersecurity space. I think that right now there's a number of resources that we built out for BSides San Francisco, BSides Seattle. So we've got resume templates. My team are always open to give kind of career advice and direction. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter. Just grateful to be part of conversations like this. We need more people like you, Travis, that are kind of, sharing the story or just hearing other people out and kind of sharing and highlighting their journeys, because this is a fascinating space. And if you allow it to be, it can feel quite lonely and isolated, but you shouldn't. There's so many great people out there and so many great resources. And I'm just thankful for the work that you do to highlight some of that.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate those kind words, and right back at you. I know you'll be back on the show 100%. Look forward to that, and hope you have a good day.
Great stuff. Thanks, Travis. Bye.
All right. Well, that wraps up today's episode. I wanted to give a shout out and thank you again to Tom Alcock of Code Red. And I hope you were able to get some value out of our conversation and the things we were talking about today. If you found this enjoyable or would like to see more, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. That helps the podcast tremendously. If you'd like to be a guest or part of the community, please visit InfosecSidekick.com or shoot me an email at InfosecSidekick@gmail.com. I'm always interested in making new connections and featuring new voices here on the podcast. Have a great week.